Well, let's take a closer look now at the impact that this conflict is having on food supply, not only within Ukraine, but also more broadly. For example, East Africa imports about 90% of its wheat from Russia and Ukraine. Somalia and the Horn of Africa is currently battling a devastating drought and heavily reliant on food aid. The UN's World Food Programme also relies heavily on wheat from this region. I'm joined now by the global spokesperson for the WFP, Tomson Phiri. He's based at the moment in Lviv in Ukraine. Tomson, thank you so much for joining us. I just want to ask you first, before we get into details around food, what is the situation currently where you are in Lviv?
Now, at the moment, it's quite calm, at least in Lviv. But just getting into Lviv in the morning, there were sirens and alarms to tell people to take shelter, warning people to go at least maybe in basements or in bunkers, because they were expecting maybe aerial bombardments. And then later, that siren or the alarm came. Started making rounds again, telling people, giving people the sign that it was all clear and they could go ahead with their business. So it's like this: you have these sirens on and off, and you're not sure exactly when the next bombardment may hit.
Must be very uncertain times. I wonder if you could talk to us about the food supply crisis within Ukraine. We heard last week that Mariupol just had a few days left of food for the citizens stuck in that city. What is the latest from Mariupol and other regions that the WFP is concerned about?
Look, the situation for cities that are encircled and in these many embattled areas, especially Mariupol, which you mentioned, has not changed. These are cities that are at very big risk of having of not having food or water for people. Humanitarians cannot access these conflict-hit areas, and there's a lack of humanitarian partners on the ground. So these are some of the biggest obstacles that we are having to contend with in our efforts to provide life-saving assistance to people who are trapped inside.
And of course, so that is a massive challenge on its own for humanitarian organizations and the WFP. But there's a bigger problem, and that is, of course, that the fighting is happening in a region that supplies a lot of grain and wheat to the world. For example, Somalia and the Horn of Africa is undergoing a major drought, massive famine, but I believe the East African region gets about 90% of its wheat from Russia and Ukraine. What can you tell us about that?
Look, this crisis is indeed happening within a larger global crisis. Before even the onset of the conflict, food prices and the prices of fertilizers was already hitting record highs. And now, the number of countries, particularly on the African continent, that rely on both Ukraine and the Russian Federation for imports of wheat is just huge. Approximately 45 African countries get their wheat supplies from there. And of these countries, almost 18 of them rely on both Russia and Ukraine to get at least 50% of their grain imports. So this includes countries like Burkina Faso, Egypt, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, which you mentioned, Sudan. And this will have a massive impact. As long as this conflict continues, people are unable to bring in grain. People are unable to bring in wheat as they used to do. They are going to be forced to go into far distant markets, and there's a risk as well that there might be competition in those markets, which might drive prices even higher.
Talk to me about the World Food Programme. My understanding, and of course you'll know more than me, is that you get about half your grain from Russia and Ukraine. How could this impact your organization's ability to source food and send it to other areas in distress, such as Yemen, such as Somalia?
Look, Ukraine is a country of 40 million, but that is feeding 400 million people worldwide. This is the breadbasket of Europe. It is a huge problem now that bumping is now happening in this bread basket. Driving across the country, it is easy to see why this country is the bread basket. There is huge mechanized agriculture, tracts of rich soil, and everybody is busy. They are producing against the odds. Now, the World Food Programme has been buying from Ukraine and Russia, by the way, but shipments from both Ukraine and Russia now have been put on hold, freezing an estimated 13.5 million tons of wheat and 16 million tons of maize. These are powerhouses in terms of food production. We are unable to give a good estimate right now of the impact because we have so many source markets and we're able to move to find food elsewhere, as well as also we are able to switch from in-kind food and provide vouchers and cash-based assistance. But if this continues, we might start to feel the pinch, because just in the 1 month that this conflict has broken out, we have had to buy, the price of food we buy has increased by almost 71 million per month, as we now have to go to distant markets, as we now have to find new contractors to get the grain from. This is a massive blow.
Thank you so much for updating us, and let's hope that this issue resolves speedily. Global spokesperson for the World Food Programme, Tomson Phiri, based at the moment in Lviv in Ukraine.